Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff. Thank you, members of the public, for joining us, and thank you for anyone joining in online. I declare this meeting open, and doing so, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to note that I've approved Councillor Smith to join this meeting electronically via Zoom. We do have the address for Councillor Smith. It may be on the screen, but that will be in the minutes. She's not in the chambers as much as she looks like she is just there. Councillor Smith, you can hear us?
Yes, I can, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. There are no announcements from me. Councillor Giles is on leave and Councillor Steck is an apology. Declaration of interest, councillors. I haven't received any as yet. Is there any declaration of interest? Sure. Which item? Sure. Impartiality interest? Councillor Gassop, thank you. So we'll stay in the room, thank you. I'll just get you to fill that form out. So Councillor Gassop has declared impartial interest for item 10.3.2. Any other declarations of interest? Thank you. We have no public question time. Confirmations from minutes from a previous OCM. Somebody happy to move those? Councillor McCleary, seconder. Councillor Kozisek. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's carried. And minutes from the advisory committee, the policy and review. Councillor Kozisek, happy to move that. And a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Andrew, thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. There are no petitions, presentations, deputations, councillors. Dealing with the agenda for this evening, coming out for conversation at this stage. 10.1.1, which requires an absolute majority. 10.1.4, which also requires an absolute majority. 10.3.1, which requires nominations. That's all that we have coming out for discussion. Thank you. Councillor McCleary. 10.3.2, sure. Any further? Councillor Kozisek. 10.4.1. The scheme amendment. Thank you. Any others? If that's the case, somebody happy to move the remainder en bloc? Councillor McCleary, seconded. Councillor Kozisek, thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. So, councillors, we are going to item 10.1.1. This item requires an absolute majority. Could I have a mover for this recommendation? Yes. Thank you. Councillor McCleary, you still have to stand. Thanks, Councillor McCleary. Second to Councillor Kozisek. Is there likely to be any debate on this, councillors? If that's the case, I'll put this recommendation. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. 10.1.4, again, this requires an absolute majority. Councillors, could I have somebody move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Kozisek. Seconder, Councillor Andrew, thank you. Likely to be any debate? Thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. 10.3.1. So, councillors, just to also let you know as well, part of the online joining from Councillor Smith, there's no policy on ballot voting. So if we get to this item on point 3, which it looks like we will do, Councillor Smith won't be able to participate in the ballot as per the legislation. I've spoken to Councillor Smith about that. How I do intend to deal with this, councillors, we'll deal with them one by one. I believe there may have been some suggestions for some changes. So if we deal with item 1 first and then progress down the view, once we endorse the terms of reference at point 2, however that looks, that will determine obviously point 3 after there. So, Councillor Smith, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor, if I may. I notice the nominees are In bold, Councillor McCleary, Andrew Steele-Cost, Yip Turner and Stecken Gassam, but my name's not on there, and I
It
did
is.
nominate.
It is now.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Smith, that was only just adjusted only about 5 minutes ago before the meeting from the minute taker. So we would have got to that before we get there. So thanks, Councillor
Thank you,
Smith.
Mr Mayor. Thank you.
And apologies for that late addition. So if that's the case, councillors, could I just start with, if somebody's happy to move point 1, we'll just get this on the table first. So just point 1 in itself, Councillor Yim, as a seconder. Thank you. Is there likely to be any debate around point 1? In this case, those happy to move point 1? This is just, Councillor Smith, this is just moving point 1. Yep, thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So that's moved, that's dealt with. Point 2, I believe there may have been a couple of questions around this. So I'll deal with this initially. Could I have somebody move that we accept those terms of reference? Somebody happy to do that? Councillor Yip. Seconder, Councillor Quain. Thank you. Now, I believe there may have been some questions or comments around this. Councillor Gasser.
Just got a question regarding just in relation to people want to nominate. Why can't we just allow whoever wants to go on the panel join the panel?
So, Councillor Gassop, the conversation's been with the consultant, with other local governments who've done this, and we've actually extended more councillors that are normally on panels for the reason too. It's great to see so much interest, which is great, but as you're aware, having committees, we also need to have some. We know that we're going to have to call meetings quite quickly. We know that we're going to have a number of points and work that we need to work through. So at this stage, the recommendation is from elected members has been that we have 4 members plus myself to ensure that we're able to work through that as efficiently as possible. But you're more than welcome to speak against that if you would like to. And so Councillor Yip has moved that. Is there anything you would like to comment at this stage, Councillor Yip? And secondly, Councillor Quain, anything from yourself? Was there a speaker against this terms of reference? If that's the case, I'll point 2. Those in favour? Those against? One against. Councillor Gassop against. Okay, so we have the terms of reference, councillors, which has 4 elected members. So at this stage, we have received those nominees. Was there anyone else? Councillor Quain, you're the only one not nominated at the moment. I'm guessing you weren't one. And there was no nominees on that list that didn't want to be part of it anymore? No? Okay. So what we'll be doing, councillors, I'll have to ask the CEO to be the returning officer with the assistance of the governance manager. If you could please assist. Again, councillors, just to be clear on this, so you vote up to 4 times. You don't have to vote 4 times, but 4 times, 4 names will go through the process. It's run on the first past the post process, meaning obviously whoever gets the most is elected through there. If there are a tie for any positions, it will go straight to a ballot out of a hat or however we need to do that. So is there any questions around that process before we go around?
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, the voting slips have got all elected members' names on them. If you can just please cross-reference to those who have nominated and then make up to 4 votes. Yeah,
and you don't, and I'm automatically on, councillors, so if you were wanting to vote for me, thank you, but you don't need to. It's not preferential at this stage, fortunately, so just an X. You can X up to 4 times. Thanks to the members of the public on this. Please just bear with us for a moment.
Through Mr Mayor, as returning officer for the vote for councillors to sit on the CEO Recruitment, Performance and Termination Committee, the following elected members have been elected. So Councillor Ben Andrew, Councillor Karen Steele, Councillor Amanda Yip and Councillor Karen Turner.
After Andrew. Yeah. Okay. Councillor, somebody happy to move that point 3? Councillor Yip, seconder. Councillor Andrew. I'll put that. Those in favour, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Point 4, you may have noticed, councillors, this has just been updated since the initial agenda went out. It initially was going to call for appointing a deputy member for the panel, but as our policy when we updated previously, all councillors become deputy members as it is, so we've just adjusted that to reflect that. Somebody happy with that? Happy to move that point 4? Thank you, Councillor Quain. Second, Councillor Andrew, thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour? That's carried, thank you. And point 5, the independent member there being Reece Williams. Somebody happy to move that? Thank you, Councillor Yip. Second, Councillor McCleary. Those in favour, please indicate. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks, councillors, for working through that. And 10.3.2 was taken out for discussion. Could I have somebody move this recommendation? I'll get it on the table first. Councillor Andrew, seconder. Councillor Turner. Councillor McCleary, did you have a question on this or are you speaking against? I'm speaking against. Thank you. Councillor Andrew, anything to start? Councillor Turner. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very supportive of Breakaway Aboriginal Corporation, but this is having a rate exempt here is really cost shifting from the government because the fees are coming from the federal government and the state government, and I believe it's happening in most of our areas. We've lost quite a bit of our rate base through this one little tweak of the law that when it says here that it's if it's a charitable organisation or not-for-profit organisation, and I can see this is a thin end of the wedge, and although it may go to SAT if we don't vote for it because we're told legally we should, I believe that we do need to make a stand and say enough's enough. We little towns all through the southwest are unable to sustain so many people, so many organisations becoming rate exempt. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Gassett.
I am familiar with this group and they do a lot of work with youth, in particular Aboriginal youth. As you know, Mr Mayor, the suicide rate in the region is 2 to 3 times.
What's your point of order, Councillor Clare?
We're not discussing the actual work that this wonderful organisation does. We're talking about the rate exempt only, which is cost shifting from the government.
Yeah. I understand, Councillor McCleary, but it is talking about the rate exemption for this particular property. So, Councillor Gassett, I'll allow you to continue.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, look, if that point of order wasn't raised, I probably wouldn't have said anything. We just elected a selection panel for the CEO, and I have to say I'm very disgusted by some of the
Councillor Gassett, now,
Councillor Gassett, now behind closed doors.
Councillor Gassett, now I'll probably ask you to redirect your debate to this point.
So, as I said, if that point of order wasn't raised, I wouldn't have said anything. I don't want to come across for the council to be racist.
Councillor Gassip, I think you could retract that
So-
statement as well.
I'll retract it. So, Mr Mayor, these guys do a lot of work for kids that have been put back into the workforce, very, I suppose, disadvantaged youth, Aboriginal sector. The suicide rate is extremely high, especially amongst the Aboriginal groups, right? And only last meeting, we actually supported another group with a $10,000 grant group who was looking after, I suppose, people with mental health issues and suicide tendencies. And this group is very similar. They are focused on Aboriginal, but also sometimes non-Aboriginal. I really think they do a good job, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against this recommendation? Question?
Is there an end date to this, or is this going to be ongoing?
Ongoing. I might just ask the CEO maybe just to expand on that a little bit further, maybe just give some slight background and that, yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Once an organisation is classed as rate exempt, it'll be ongoing unless the legislation is changed and there's been no interest from the government to change the current legislation for rate exemptions.
Which we have written to them about previously, Councillor Steele. Yes.
If things change as well with this organisation, they get funding elsewhere, do we have the chance to actually withdraw, like change our decision?
CEO.
Mr Mayor, the agenda item talks around how the land use creates the exemption. So it's not their funding mechanism. If they meet the criteria for exemption under the section 626 of the Act, then they are eligible ongoing to have that rate exemption.
Speaker against the recommendation. Councillor Andrew? Anything to close? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Those against? One against. Thank you. That's carried. 10.4.1, I believe we're at. Could I have somebody move this? Councillor McCleary, as seconder. Councillor Kozisek. Councillor Kozisek, you wanted to pull this out. Did you want to speak to it, I'm assuming? A query? Okay, we'll go with that first. Yep, question?
The query was regarding the use as a small, I've got my notes, a small liquor store, is that what it said? My apologies, I should have been more prepared. And my query is, are there any circumstances where that could change to be a larger facility?
Sure. CEO,
make
I know Mr. Barber's not here, but I'm sure he has a very suitable backup if you can't answer that one, CEO.
I'm sorry, Councillor Steckler. Sorry, Councillor Kozig, I'm struggling. Perhaps Ms Hodge might be able to help out with addressing that.
Yeah, through the Mayor. So this is proposing a limitation on the size. I believe a small liquor store is limited to 300 metres squared under the scheme, but this is proposing an additional restriction on that. It can also depend on the tenancy. So if the actual tenant changes, that would maybe warrant a new DA that's submitted with a new management plan, operational management plan.
That answers your question, Councillor Kozak. Thank you. Was there likely to be any debate on this one, councillors? If that's the case, I'm happy to put this recommendation. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. And councillors, we do have, before we go there, we do have an application for leave, even though she is here, Councillor Smith. Can we have somebody move that leave is approved? Councillor Smith, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Kozisek, thank you. I'll put that. Those in favour? Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's carried. And councillors, I do have that. I believe there are some questions from members. Councillor Gassip.
Not sure which ones you've got, but First one was,
Yep, over to you.
First one was from email from Mr. Mark Burrows. He's a disabilities advocate, asking questions about the visitor centre in town, the trial one, the old museum, whether why there's no, I suppose, caravan parking and other questions along with that, which you've got, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not sure if you want to answer them now or next time.
So questions from members, Councillor Gassop, is an opportunity for elected members to ask questions. So if there are particular questions now, obviously public questions are different. If you have any direct questions you want to ask, we can take them now.
Oh, okay, so on behalf of Mr. Mike Burrows, can I ask why there is no RV parking outside the old museum for visitors?
Sure. I'll ask the CEO if he has a response for that or if he has to take it on notice.
Happy to respond, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So basically the two locations that have been chosen are being trialled in accordance with the council decision that was made regarding the Bunbury Museum and Heritage Centre and Kambana Bay. I think we previously discussed the fact that within 260 metres, so in front of the old railway station, there are a series of long vehicle bays that are untimed for any visitors who may want to use those, who want to spend some time in the city to either visit the visitor centre in its current location at the Museum and Heritage Centre or to enjoy the retail and hospitality options in the city. Acrod Bays already exist, or an Acrod Bay, I should say, already exists outside the Bunbury Museum and Heritage Centre that meets current legislative requirements. Subject to Council's final decision on the permanent location of one or more visitor centres, the matter may need to be addressed at that time in terms of other infrastructure requirements to ensure accessibility and long vehicle parking are in close proximity.
Thank you. Another question?
Mr. Mayor, I sent you an email from the Honourable Jason Clare, Federal Minister for Education. Sorry, can't hear. Mr. Mayor, I sent you a letter from the Honourable Jason Clare this morning, who responded to an earlier letter and submission from myself and a group about tertiary education, and he's offered in that letter for myself, so I wrote it in a personal way, to make a submission, further submission to the Australian Universities Accord, which will take into account tertiary education in regional areas. So my question to you, Mr. Mayor, as I've put in the email, would you be willing to contribute to a response to this letter to advocate for tertiary education in regional areas?
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Gassett. We'll have to take that on notice. I did receive your email, haven't had a chance to process it or look into it fully yet, and I'll provide that through the CEO, and an answer will be in the minutes for the next meeting. I can't provide that. Thank you. Another question?
Ask one more.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, I alluded to it earlier on about suicidal rates in the regional areas, and 2 to 3 times that of the metropolitan area. So I'm penning a letter to the Prime Minister and to the Premier, Mr. Mayor.
Is this a question, Councillor
Yes,
Gassett?
it is a question. So, but the standing order says we can explain what the question is. So it's a question, and the letter would be to see if they'll change legislation to include.
The question also needs to be clear and concise and not include any debate, Councillor Gassett. So I'm just wondering what
The
your
letter
question is.
will be generally about including mental harm perpetrated by people on others that causes psychological health harm to be included in the criminal code, Mr. Mayor. So that's the intention of my letter. Would you support that?
I'll take that on notice, Councillor Gassett. I'm not going to support anything without reading it first. So I'll take that on notice. Thank you. Councillors, we now are required to go behind closed doors. Before we do, Councillor Smith, do you have that form in front of you need to read? You just need to, I just need to probably do that before we go behind closed doors. Do you have that with you, Councillor Smith, your declaration?
No, I don't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, hang on, I'll just read it to you what you need to do.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, I just need you to, I need you to make a declaration along the line, so it doesn't need to be exact. I declare that I will maintain confidentiality for the debate items 15.1.1, 15.1.2, 15.1.3 of the meeting agenda.
I so declare, Mr Mayor. Can
So-
I also advise the meeting that I'm in a secure room that's been used by my daughter for lots of confidential meetings in the past, so it's a secure room. So I assure the meeting and yourself that I can maintain strict confidentiality.
Thank you. I'll take that declaration. Councillors, go. Somebody we move behind closed doors to deal with these matters. Thank you. Councillor Andrew, seconder. Councillor Kozisek. I'll put that. Those in favour, please indicate. Councillor Smith, thank you. That's carried unanimously. So, members of the public, thank you. We do have a couple of items here to deal with behind closed doors. We will read those recommendations at the conclusion. Thank you. Georgia. Welcome back to the favourite part of my role, is to read out the recommendations, and anyone online I should comment. While behind closed doors, Council approved the following recommendations. The first one, 15.1.1, which was moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Turner, and carried unanimously. And that was that Council, pursuant to RFT 223007, Jacaranda Crescent to Hudson Road Connector Road construction, accept the tender from Carboni Bros for the price of $535,042, excluding GST, subject to minor variations to be negotiated with accordance with Reg 20 of the Local Government Regulations 1996. 2. Delegates power and authority to the CEO to negotiate and agree with Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited minor variations in accordance with Reg 20 of the FG regulations, subject to seeing sufficient funds available within the approved expenditure budget. 3, subject to resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into a contract with Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited to provide the construction of a connector road in Withers, being Jacaranda Crescent to Hudson Road. And 4, following entry into the contract, negotiate variations with Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited to the respective contracts, subject to being sufficient funds available within the approved budget expenditure for the project item. That's near enough. So that was approved and carried. Thank you. 15.1.2 was also approved and carried unanimously. That was moved by Councillor McCleary and seconded by Councillor Turner. That recommended was pursuant to RFT 223008, Central Withers Connector Roads construction, accept the tender from Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited for the price of $1,098,359.56, excluding GST, subject to minor variations to be negotiated in accordance with Reg 20 of the Local Government Regulations 1996. Delegates power and authority of the CEO to negotiate and agree with Carboni Bros minor variations in accordance with Regulation 20 of the FG regulations, subject to being sufficient funds available within the approved expenditure budget. 3, subject to resolutions 1 and 2, authorise the CEO to enter into a contract with Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited to provide the construction of 3 connector roads in Withers, linking Devonport Way and Rancourt, Hopper Place and Stallard Place and Mawson Place and Reynolds Way. And following entry into the contract, negotiate variations with Carboni Bros Proprietary Limited to respective contracts, subject to there being sufficient funds available with the approved budget expenditure for that project or line item. As I mentioned, that was carried unanimously. Item 15.1.3, this was moved by Councillor Andrew and seconded by Councillor Yip and carried 9 votes to 1. That executive recommendation was that Council confirm the respondent listed at confidential appendix 15.1.3a as the preferred respondent for COB 5427, South West Regional Waste Management Services, to provide waste management services within the City of Bunbury local government area. 2, authorise the CEO to negotiate with the preferred respondent with a view of finalising the relevant contractual documentation, subject to being sufficient funds available within the approved budget. 3, if agreement cannot be reached with the preferred respondent, authorise the CEO to negotiate minor variations with the next preferred respondent with a review of finalising the relevant contractual document, subject to there being sufficient funds available within the approved budget. 4, subject to the above recommendations, authorise the CEO to enter into contract with the preferred respondent for the mandatory waste management services, being the recycling, processing and a nominal portion of the education and administration support at the agreed rates within the City of Bunbury local government area, and B, the ability to engage the discretionary waste management services at the agreed rates to allow the City to utilise or implement those services during the term of contract if required operationally within the City of Bunbury local government area. Whereas service is currently undertaken in-house by the City of Bunbury, the discretionary waste management service will not be implemented without further consultation and decision from Council. As I mentioned, that was carried 9 votes to 1. Thank you councillors, thank you staff, thank you members of the public. There's no further items, Councillor Gassett. I'll declare this meeting closed at 6:07.